They always said this town could smell trouble before it arrived. Dust carried secrets here. Whispers rode the wind between wooden porches and church steps. Eyes watched from behind lace curtains, waiting for someone, anyone to slip. So when she grabbed his wrist and hissed, "Don," someone might see the warning wasn't about modesty. It was about survival. Before this story pulls you in too deep, take a second, subscribe to the channel, share this with your friends, because stories like this don't just entertain, they linger. And once you hear what the rancher did next, you'll understand why this town never slept the same again. The rancher didn't slow down. He didn't pull his hand away, didn't look around, didn't care who was watching. He just smiled, slow, calm, dangerous, and stepped forward anyway. The first thing people noticed about him wasn't his size, though he was big enough to block a doorway. It wasn't his scars either, though there were plenty pale lines carved into skin by years of barbed wire and bad decisions. It was the way he moved through town like he didn't owe anyone an explanation. And in a place like this, that was unforgivable. Her name didn't matter yet. Not to them. Not to the town that had already decided who she was before she ever opened her mouth. She was just that woman, the one who didn't belong where she stood. The one who made church ladies clutch their pearls and men suddenly remember important errands whenever she walked by. She knew the rules. Everyone did. You don't touch what the town disapproves of. You don't stand too close, and you sure as hell don't do it where people can see. That's why her voice shook when she warned him. Not because she didn't want him, but because she knew exactly what would happen if he didn't let go. He leaned in close enough that only she could hear him. "Let them see." The words landed heavier than any shout. Across the street, old Mr. Granger stopped sweeping his porch. Two women mid-gossip froze, mouths half open. A teenage boy nearly dropped his soda bottle. The town didn't gasp all at once. It went quiet, the kind of quiet that means something irreversible just happened. The rancher took her hand and didn't hide it, didn't rush, didn't pretend. He walked with her right down the main road, boots striking the dirt slow and deliberate, as if every step was a challenge thrown straight at the town's feet. People stared like they were watching a fire crawl toward their homes. She tried to pull away once. Just once. "Please," she whispered. "You don't understand what they'll do." That's when he stopped walking. Right there, in the open, in front of God, the grocery store, and every judgment this town had ever sharpened. He turned to face her fully, his voice low but steady. "I understand exactly what they'll do," he said. "I just don't care anymore." And that was the moment the town lost its mind. Because this wasn't just about holding hands. It never was. It was about defiance, about a man who had already buried too many pieces of himself under this land and refused to bury one more. About a woman who had spent her whole life being told to shrink, to hide, to wait for permission that never came. By sunset, everyone knew. By nightfall, stories had grown teeth. Some said he'd lost his sanity after years alone on the ranch. Others claimed he was doing it on purpose, provoking, mocking, daring them to act. The preacher called it a moral collapse. The sheriff called it complicated, which meant he didn't want to touch it. And her? She sat on the edge of his porch later that night, knees drawn up, listening to the cicadas scream like the town couldn't. "They'll come for you," she said softly. He leaned against the railing beside her, handing her a mug of coffee like this was any other evening. "Let them," he replied. "This land's taken worse shots than gossip." She looked at him then. Really looked. At the quiet confidence, the exhaustion behind his eyes. The way he didn't posture or brag or beg. "You don't owe me this," she said. He took a breath, long and slow. "I'm not doing it for you," he said. "I'm doing it because I'm tired of pretending I don't exist." The next morning, the first rock hit his fence. By noon, the rumors turned into threats. And by nightfall, the town gathered. Not officially, not announced, but everyone knew where they were going. Because when a man breaks the unspoken rules, a town like this doesn't ask questions. It answers back. And the rancher? He lit the lanterns on his porch one by one, calm as a man setting the table for a storm. He didn't know how bad it would get yet. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was done backing down. The town didn't come all at once. That would have been honest. Instead, it arrived in pieces, like rot spreading slow through good wood. First was the silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that follows you, the kind that presses against your ears until you realize no one is greeting you anymore. No nods, no casual hellos. Doors closed a second too early. Conversation stopped mid-sentence when Boots crossed the boardwalk. She noticed it before he did. When she stepped into the general store that morning, the bell above the door rang loud enough to feel like an accusation. Every head turned. No one smiled. The clerk didn't ask what she needed. He just stared, jaw tight, like she'd tracked mud onto the town's soul. She left without buying anything. By the time she reached the ranch, her hands were shaking. "They're already deciding what I am," she said, pacing the porch. "They always do." The rancher was repairing a hinge on the barn door, movement steady, methodical. He didn't look up right away. "Let them," he said again. She stopped pacing. "You keep saying that like it doesn't cost anything." That made him pause. He straightened slowly, wiped his hands on his jeans, and finally met her eyes. "Oh, it costs," he said. "I just decided I'm done paying a loan." Before she could answer, the sound reached them. Hooves, multiple horses, not in a hurry, not aggressive, deliberate, a message. The rancher stepped forward, eyes narrowing toward the road. Dust rose in a low cloud, and through it came 3 men, all familiar, all respected, all smiling the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. She felt her chest tighten. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, not today." He squeezed her hand once, firm and grounding. "Go inside," he said quietly. She didn't want to, but she did. From the window she watched as the men dismounted. No weapons in hand. That was worse. Weapons meant rules. This was something else. "Morning," the tallest one said, tipping his hat. "Heard you've been stirring things up." The rancher leaned against the fence post, casual as a man discussing the weather. "Funny," he replied. "All I did was walk through town." One of the men chuckled. "With her." The word landed heavy. "Not a name, a label. You know how folks are," another added. "They don't like change." The rancher shrugged. "Then they're going to have a rough time." The smiles vanished. "You're putting people in an uncomfortable position," the tallest man said. "Church boards talking. Merchants too. Sheriffs catching heat. And we're here to give you a chance to make this right." The rancher tilted his head. "Define right." A pause. Then quietly, "You stop. Stop seeing her. Stop walking with her. Stop reminding the town that its rules weren't written by God." The rancher laughed. Not loud, not mocking. Just once. Short, final. "No." The air shifted. "You think you're bigger than this town?" the man asked. "No," the rancher replied. "I think I'm freer." That's when the first threat slipped. Nothing direct, nothing illegal. Just enough to let him know that fences could burn, livestock could wander. Accidents happened. When they left, the dust lingered longer than it should have. That night, the first lantern shattered. Glass exploded against the barn wall, flame licking dry wood before he stamped it out. She screamed from the porch. He didn't. He just stood there, chest rising slow, eyes dark. "It's starting," she said, voice breaking. He nodded. "Yeah, what if it gets worse?" He looked at her then, really looked. The fear she tried to hide, the strength she didn't know she carried. Then we don't face it quietly. The next day, the preacher spoke without saying names. Sin, temptation, decay. Every eye drifted toward the empty pew where the rancher never sat anyway. By afternoon, someone painted words on his fence. Ugly words, permanent words. She cried when she saw them. He handed her a cloth and paint thinner. "Help me," he said. They scrubbed together until their hands ached, until the wood was scarred but clean. People watched from the road. None offered help. That was the moment something inside her hardened. That night she stood beside him on the porch as the town gathered at the edge of his land, dozens this time. Men, women, even kids perched on wagons, eyes wide like this was entertainment. The sheriff stepped forward. "You're causing unrest," he said. "I can't protect you if this keeps going." The rancher raised his lantern higher, light spilling over the crowd. "I didn't ask for protection," he said. "I asked for space to live." "And her?" someone shouted. She stepped forward before he could stop her. "I'm not a disease," she said, voice shaking but loud. "I'm a person," the crowd murmured. Some angry, some uncertain, a few ashamed. The rancher felt it then, the shift, not toward peace, toward inevitability. This wasn't going to fade. This was going to explode. He reached for her hand in front of everyone. Gasps, shouts. A woman screamed that children were present. "Look," the rancher said, voice carrying. "Look at us. This is what you're afraid of?" Silence. He took a breath. "If you want me gone," he continued, "say it. Don't hide behind whispers and broken glass." No one answered, but no one left either. That was the answer. Later, after the crowd dispersed without resolution, she sat on the bed, knees hugged to her chest. "You could still stop," she said softly. "I'd understand." He sat beside her, careful, like she might break. "I won't," he said. "Why?" "Because if I let them decide this," he replied, "they'll decide everything." Outside, the wind carried voices, plans, anger fermenting. The town wasn't done, and neither was he. The night didn't announce itself. No thunder, no warning, just a wrongness in the air, the kind that makes animals restless and men lie awake staring at ceilings they built themselves. The rancher was already awake when the first scream cut through the dark. Not fear, rage. He was on his feet before the sound finished echoing, pulling on his boots, grabbing the lantern. She was right behind him, barefoot, heart slamming so hard it felt like it might crack her ribs. "Stay inside," he said. She shook her head. "I'm done hiding." They stepped onto the porch together. Fire. Not the barn, not yet. The fence line. Flames crawling along the dry posts like hungry fingers, lighting the road in violent orange. Shadows of people moved beyond it. Figures retreating, laughing, already congratulating themselves for courage that only existed in numbers. The rancher didn't shout, didn't curse. He just walked, straight down the steps, straight toward the fire. She followed until the heat forced her back, tears streaking down her face as he tore fence posts free, beating flames into the dirt with his own hands. His shirt caught sparks, his knuckles split open. He didn't slow. By the time the fire died, the message was clear. This wasn't a warning anymore. It was permission. At sunrise, the sheriff arrived with 2 deputies and no authority left in his eyes. "You need to leave," he said quietly. "For your own good." The rancher looked past him, toward town, toward the church steeple catching first light, toward streets that had decided he was expendable. "And if I don't?" The sheriff swallowed. "Then I can't promise what happens next." She stepped forward. "You never could." The sheriff flinched. By noon, the town gathered again, but this time, not at the edge of the ranch. They came onto it, men with ropes, women with tight mouths and righteous anger, boys trying to look brave. The preacher stood front and center, Bible in hand like a weapon. "This has gone far enough," he declared. "You're poisoning this community." The rancher stepped down from the porch, slow and steady. "No," he said, "I'm exposing it." Someone threw a stone, it hit his shoulder. Another followed, then another. She screamed his name. He raised a hand, not in surrender but in command. "Stop," he said, and somehow they did. He reached into his jacket and pulled out papers, deeds, letters, old records yellowed with time. "You all know this land," he said, "but you don't know its story." The preacher scoffed. "This isn't the time." "It's the only time," the rancher cut in. He turned, voice carrying sharp as a bell. "This ranch was built by a man you drove out," he said. "A man you called a problem. A man who loved someone." "You said he shouldn't." Murmurs rippled. "He was my father." Silence fell hard enough to hurt. "You burned his barn," the rancher continued. "You broke his spirit. You told him to leave or else." He lifted his chin. He chose or else. Someone whispered a name the town pretended to forget. The rancher looked at her then, eyes softer. "They didn't just do this to me," he said. "They did it to her. Years ago, same words, same fear, same hate. Understanding spread like shock. This wasn't rebellion. It was inheritance. You taught me something," he said to the crowd. "You taught me what silence costs." The preacher stepped back, shaken. The rancher folded the papers carefully. "I'm not leaving," he said, "but I'm done asking to exist." He turned to her and held out his hand. She took it. Together, they walked back to the porch and sat. The town didn't move, didn't cheer, didn't attack. They just stood there, forced to see themselves reflected in a man who refused to bend. By nightfall, people drifted away, one by one, not forgiven, not absolved, just tired. Weeks passed. The fence was rebuilt, slowly, with help from unexpected hands. A woman who brought food, a boy who apologized without words. Even the sheriff, once, standing awkwardly with nails and a hammer. The town didn't change overnight, but it cracked. And sometimes that's enough. One evening, as the sun sank low and quiet settled over land that had finally exhaled, she leaned into him on the porch. "They didn't win," she said. He smiled, tired but real. "No," he replied, "they just ran out of places to hide."